You're listening to the Digital Deep Dive, where we tackle the newest trends, strategies, and pain points shaping growth across the digital landscape. From Amazon and D2C to international expansion, join our host and e-commerce leaders across multiple industries for in-depth discussions on how to maximize your brands in the digital arena. Now, here's your host, Aaron Conant.
Well, hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Digital Deep Dive podcast. I'm your host, Aaron Conant, and this is going to be a fun conversation today around Amazon. I don't think anybody's surprised that we bring this up quite a bit because, we've been doing a lot of, I've been having a lot of conversations. We've been doing a lot of events around the country lately around Amazon advertising, and DSP is something that comes up. And what's interesting around the DSP aspect is that Amazon allows you to, drive traffic to your own direct-to-consumer site using the demand-side platform. And that has sparked a ton of interest from brands that traditionally wouldn't necessarily look at Amazon. But now they're like, wait a minute, maybe it's worth it, right? And they've been evaluating it. They didn't know if it was worth it or not. And now there's like a key way for them to utilize the Amazon ecosystem to build a direct-to-consumer site. But then once they get a taste of Amazon, they want maybe more. They want to look at it a little bit deeper. And so I have a longtime friend, Matt Rosenfeld over at Crush AMZ, just fantastic people in the network. We've known each other for a long time, and had a conversation with him around this aspect. And he had some really cool thoughts about different dynamics playing out within Amazon. And so I thought, hey, let's invite him on. You have a really cool Q&A for 45 minutes or so, but Matt, I'll kick it over to you. Want to do a quick intro on yourself and Crush? That'd be awesome. And then we'll kind of jump into the conversation. Sound good?
Sounds great. Thank you for having me. Very excited to be on the podcast. I'll give you a quick kind of background and how we got here in Crush. So I'm Matt Rosenfeld, founder of Crush. I started as a seller back in 2017. So have experience kind of on both sides of the market and was really selling just data-driven opportunities. So commodity-oriented whipped cream dispensers, creme brulee torches. Was in that world until 2021 and went ultimately into the aggregation space. Worked on the aggregator side, running a huge portfolio, 1,600 plus SKUs across different categories. Ultimately, the narrative that I saw playing out was when you don't have a brand on Amazon, over time, you inevitably end up competing on price. When you end up competing on price, you have no margin and the business kind of starts to decline, obviously. And so with Crush, we set out to work with brands that we like to say care about brand. So we're boutique, full service Amazon solution for D2C retail first brands. Take a very narrative driven approach to Amazon to can do unique selling propositions. And we really like to work with premium products, which is sometimes not what people associate with Amazon, but where we have found the majority of our success. So excited to get into that today.
Yeah, it should be fun. Really quick side conversation is around the aggregator space.
Yeah.
I just want to scratch a little bit on that surface. Then I want to get into like how brands, should be thinking about Amazon as a whole. The aggregator space, we've watched the Thracios. We've watched what is your quick take on the aggregator space?
So I think it's been a very interesting ride. My position the whole time was it's very, very hard to come close to the level of category expertise that, using myself as an example, that I knew about the creme brulee torch market in 2018. I knew every seller. I knew what they were doing when they changed price. I knew why they were running a coupon. I knew the market dynamics. I think that competitive edge is so crucial when you are in more of these kind of commodity-oriented categories where at scale, when you try to operate kind of economies of scale, levels of efficiency, shared services across categories, the overlap is not actually as great as I think the perceived impact would be. And so over time, you end up not being able to continue to drive growth. You cannot launch products as well because you don't know the categories as well. You don't see the trends. And I think it just took a long time for that to come to fruition. But interestingly enough, I think a huge component of this has been that real brands are entering the marketplace. And the amount of market share and speed to take it at these brands, the impact they have on categories is huge. And so coming from an Amazon only perspective, there isn't endless longevity in these brands. And so it was a little bit, in my opinion, inevitable that we'd get here. But I'm curious to see how the larger players that are still operating are able to pivot.
Yeah, I think people realize once they got into it, really great idea on the surface, really hard to
Yes.
execute over and over and over. It is hard to grow a brand on Amazon, and the synergies that you get on the back end and the supply chain and the shipping and everything cannot make up for the cost that's required of throwing people at it. For, people like you in a
Yes.
particular category that know it and how to grow it, you have to stack people, and that doesn't get you the economies of scale you were hoping for when you're buying these brands. Yeah.
Yeah.
Super.
And I do think it would have been a different story where the ultimate kind of impact, the outsized impact here was that everybody started racing to acquire all the good brands, but there's a finite number of good brands. And so when multiples got driven up so high, you really had your payback timeline is just too long for the Amazon, like the average life cycle of an Amazon product.
Yeah. Awesome.
All right.
So thanks so much for that. I think we align there, and I think that's what I hear from a lot of brands, right? And even people that were in the aggregator space like you that are still in it, and just I think there's a viable business model there. I think they just need to fine tune it. So let's jump back into kind of the original train of thought here, and that is around brands and looking at Amazon. And I'd love you to kind of walk through how you look at Amazon and kind of this dichotomy that's going on, and then we'll just kind of riff on that for a little bit. Sound good?
Sounds great. So we look at Amazon as having there's two key components that comprise Amazon. There's one for the brands we work with, which again are established B2C retail first brands, already have a presence. There's demand capture and there's net new customer acquisition. And so on the demand capture side of things, what we find is that most brands right now, when you pass a certain revenue size, maybe 3 to 5 million in annual revenue, by not being on Amazon, you are actually missing out on volume, right? That's just the reality. The slippage from Meta or TikTok can be 15 to 25%. And so if you're not there and people have the preference to buy, you are missing on that volume. And it's very, very efficient, right? To round out your economics. The other side of the platform is net new customer acquisition. On Amazon, time and time again, we see that purchase intent is substantially higher than any of these other channels. That then lends itself to higher conversion rates and a more seamless kind of customer experience. And so we have seen with the brands we work with, we've been able to drive much more efficient 3 to 4x improvement in cost per acquisition compared to what we are getting on Meta. The conversation then becomes, how much do you value first party data? What happens to subsequent purchases? There is definitely some conversation to be had there, but those are really the ways in which we like to segment the market and then define different strategies to go into them.
So when your advice then to a brand, and it probably differentiates based on the type of product they are, but you're a $30 to $50 item, $30 to $100 to $200 item. You're focused on direct to consumer. You're looking at Amazon. It's basically you're missing out if you're not there, right? There used to be, there's going to be brand aggregation. There's going to be all these third party sellers going to drop the price. But what you're seeing is it's totally worth it. You can't miss out on it.
There's no downside anymore. In my opinion, there is only upside. And if you look around and look at the brands that are on Amazon that are doing extremely well, they've done the best job of positioning their brand right within the platform. And it's different because you have to work within the confines of what Amazon gives you. Carousel images, A+ content, title, bullet points, etc. But the brands that are winning have been able to create a cohesive story for their consumers across all channels, whether or not they're discovering it for the first time on Amazon or on their site. And as long as you can ensure that you're doing that with that quality first brand story approach, I think there's only upside for you to be had.
Are you then encouraging them to, you brought up first party data, right? This is going to be huge going forward with AI and all the tools that are being built that are going to lay on your first party data. So that's still top of mind for a ton of people. With, as mentioned at the beginning, with DSP, you can actually take your ideal customer you can take your customer list, upload it to the marketing cloud into a clean room. Everything's, deduped. Everything's, personalization taken out, but they can then essentially match that person and then drive traffic back to your direct consumer site. It's kind of counterintuitive because it used to not be that way, right? You used to have to, you're on Amazon, paid media is on Amazon. And if you do any kind of, I'm AMG back in the day, you're driving it back to an Amazon landing page or, your detail page. How do you see that thing playing out as a whole?
It's really interesting. And for different brands, it will perform differently. My general approach here is advertising to Amazon audiences will always perform more efficiently if the conversion is taking place on Amazon. That is my take here. If you are a brand where first-party data is essential, or you are only offering a subscription product, like an example here could be Athletic Greens, right? That's their business model. Then you will never leverage Amazon as a marketplace. And then I think it still makes sense to leverage DSP and those audiences. But if you are a brand where you will have individual units, you're trying to acquire new customers, you want to make sure you're covering your bases. If you're going to do that, I think, again, efficiency will only improve if you are selling within Amazon as well.
So have those ads drive back to Amazon. They're just going to be higher performing.
Or you could still have them sent to your D2C site, but the having the optionality for the customer to decide whether or not they want to purchase on Amazon or your site will increase overall efficiency for the brand as a whole, without a doubt.
What do you think is it just a money grab then? They see how much money, additional ad dollars they could get if they just allowed brands to drive to the direct consumer site? Is this just an additional money grab as they build this advertising behemoth? We have, like CTV calls and, Amazon advertising would never be on them. And now it's popping up. They're obviously a massive marketing play here.
Yeah. And I think what I was writing down is Amazon is an advertising company, right? That's the majority of their profitability is driven by ads. I think what this is there are more and more companies that I'm surprised that they've entered the Amazon ecosystem and have done well. Like an example is like a Nutrafol, for example. They're a huge business. They are driving an extreme amount of value out of an Amazon marketplace. And that is not a brand that you would typically expect to be within that ecosystem. What I think they're doing with DSP is the long game. They're getting brands to get into the ecosystem. They're demonstrating that there's efficiency and value. And the logical consideration of saying, hey, we're running DSP, we're running it to our site, it's getting a 1.5x return is, what? Maybe we should just put a product on and see if it's better. And that return will be higher without a doubt. And so I really think it's making it just easier. They're lowering the barrier to entry for brands to get into that ecosystem. And over time, I think all it does is bring more brands onto the platform.
Oh, yeah, I agree, because it is an easy test and learn then, right? Hey, why don't we just throw one product?
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, Amazon wins, right? Like we were just doing a call around DSP yesterday, a webinar. And what was funny is everything was coming out. At the end of the day, Amazon wins. They grab more money. Yes, they're going to drive traffic. Yes, you're going to get conversion. Yes, you're going to say they get more of your money, right? It's there forever. I've thought this, right? Since I first jumped onto the platform, over a decade ago, it was really evident that Amazon's number one goal was to extract as much money from my company as possible. And they would do it via margin. They do it damage allowances, co-op allowances, transportation, advertising, package inserts for fresh, Amazon Today, whatever it might be. They were extracting money from the company, which is quite honest. It's funny. And people keep doing it. But it works. That's the crazy thing, that it works. Are there new things that are popping up that you're seeing?
The new things we're seeing right now is that Amazon is, and we get these questions all the time, Amazon is very different than it was 2 years ago, right? So I don't think there's as many new levers to be pulled at any given time, but I think the frame at which you have to view Amazon is changing all the time, right? This is no longer a marketplace where you can launch and drive a ton of traffic and somewhat kind of manipulate ranking to become the top seller in 30 or 60 days, right? The path to winning on Amazon, in our experience with every brand, has been repeatable, sustainable, incremental improvements in strategy over time that consistently drive improvement month over month. that will work every time, right? If you have to do things artificially to inflate this that are not sustainable, that's not a long-term viable strategy for success on Amazon, right? The algorithm is too smart now. They've seen it all. It knows everything that's been done to manipulate your rank. And so you really have to go back to the basics and use what Amazon has given you. So a lot of what we do is we rely heavily on brand analytics, right? And search query performance and week on week keyword level changes in click-through rate and conversion and impressions. Nurturing that week on week for your products and leaning into where you're finding improvement is almost the guaranteed path for your product to continue to drive more revenue, because it all just comes back to math at the end of the day. And if you can nurture that, you're going to win.
Yeah. The only silver bullet's hard work. Right. And what's really interesting.
Exactly.
I've seen a lot of the foreign brands coming in from overseas that used to, use all the trick tactics. And they're actually taking the approach that you're talking about. They're playing the long game.
Yeah.
And the thing that they're over indexing on right now is paid media, where I've got, they'll come in with a single product and they'll be dumping $100,000 a month into a brand new product, losing money consistently for a year until they hit the top of search rank. And it's taking 10 months to a year to get there. Previously when you could game the system, right, you could skyrocket in a month or two. Now it's taken 10 months to a year, but then they're at the top and they've done everything right. So it's hard to unseat them in that. And they're being very strategic in the threads that they're pulling. But that's just, it's an interesting tactic that I know, a lot of, domestic companies here, that's not a toleration that they'll have. They won't lose money on a single product, $100,000 to, $110,000 a month to play the long game of, hey, I'm going to be number one seller for the next 3 years. But I find it interesting what you're saying. I see, a lot of people complain about the overseas sellers coming in. Like they're actually, a lot of them are playing the game now and they're playing it perfectly. They have a tolerance for loss for a longer period of time though.
And they're also, the one thing I will say that's very interesting about the overseas sellers is they have learned the playbook, to your point.
Mm-hmm.
There is more slow moving US-based legacy Amazon businesses that are not willing to do the work to bring their listings where they need to be for the current Amazon consumer. The overseas sellers are moving more quickly here and they're taking market share and they're understanding it's this path of looking at Amazon. What is Amazon investing in, right? Look at premium beauty, one of their fastest growing segments right now. That is a market where the average purchase price for cosmetics is probably $40 or $50, right? Those are real high value CPG and D2C consumers, and the experience they need to feel confident in their purchase decision is not what listings were even in 2017 and 2018. And so that it is not a game of, oh, we've been in this market for 10 years and we've got 20,000 reviews. That's no basis to stop iterating and improving on your listing to make sure that you're giving the current demographics and the change in kind of demands and preferences what they need to feel comfortable buying your product.
Yeah, it's super interesting because staying on top of, it used to be, I did the same thing. You'd build it and you'd set it and you'd forget it for like 6 months to a year before you went back and touched it. Things are changing so fast now. Especially Amazon, what they're doing on the back end to make sure people aren't manipulating the system, but also how people are searching for product is changing more rapid. And that's a lot of it's due to social media. It's due to TikTok. It's how their brains are being trained to think just over the past 2 years, how it's changed. Is there like a recommended, like how often that you see people touching ASINs? You can't touch an ASIN, every month if you've got 2,500 ASINs. Right? Maybe you can. If you've got 10,000, you can't. How do you how should people be thinking about dividing that up to go after, the most, so you don't get to the land of diminishing returns. You focus on those things that are most meaningful.
Yeah, I would really think about 3 different metrics, right? And this is exactly how we look at Amazon: click-through rate, conversion rate, and impression share. our recommendation would be a 6 to 8 week testing cycle where you're not tweaking too much and you focus on one metric, right, of those three. So when I'm thinking about click-through rate, you have to think about what levers you have at your disposal there, right? You've got the first 80 characters of your title from mobile. You've got your main image, and you've got pricing and promotions, and to some extent reviews, right? So you're relatively limited in what you can start testing. So I would pick 2 or 3 of those, implement those changes, monitor over that 8-week period, and look at how things have changed. And if you can improve your click-through rate by 2% and conversion and impressions stay the same, your revenue is going to go up. And I would slowly continue iterating through those 3 metrics and just using them as your baseline to understand what is working and what is not. And when you get to the point where you feel like you've really optimized click-through and conversion, as a function of the algorithm being smart, you will see your impressions increase. Your organic rank will go up. You will be able to see that the rising tide raises all boats. Those are the signals the algorithm is looking at. And I try to do this thing that sounds silly, but if you put yourself in the shoes of Amazon, what are they trying to do? They are trying to show every customer the product they have the highest likelihood of buying as quickly as possible in their search journey. The metrics that influence that are click-through rate and conversion rate. How often is this product clicked and how often is it bought by what consumers? So if you are trying to be that product, that is all you need to focus on. It changes category by category, but that will be the equation for you to be looked at favorably by Amazon.
Yeah, what I love about that is what you're most likely to buy. It's not putting the best product.
Yeah.
It's not always putting the best product. No. It is the product you're most likely to purchase as quickly as possible. Yes. Amazon's a conversion platform. That's what it is. It's high intent, right? I always say, like, if you're looking for like Father's Day, if you're looking for best Father's Day gifts, you type that into Google, right? You already know what you want. Father's best dad mug. You go to Amazon because it's high intent. Yep. I need a pair of socks, right? Search on best socks on Amazon, and then you buy. And so I think a lot of times people lose that in their search. Search is then different for everybody that's out there, potentially different for everybody based on your past buying history, what you bought, the ads that they've sold you. Because the interesting other thing is Amazon loves their ad business, right? And part of that algorithm, I think, is built in to drive sales to the people who are doing ads. Obviously, they want to convert. They want to show the conversion. And so those items that you're most likely to buy are also influenced by ads that you've seen. Amazon's in it to make money. I mean, I've been picking your brain for a while. Any like questions to throw back my way? I'm more than happy to answer anything.
Yeah, I think from our perspective, I'm very curious to understand when brands are evaluating legacy new brands, looking at Amazon from your position, how do they view the platform today? Because I think we often see from one side of brands when they're already interested, right? We're generally not convincing someone that it is the right place to be. But when you talk about Amazon from that lens, how are you looking at the platform today?
That's interesting because, obviously the horrible answer is it depends based on the brand. But brands, how they're, first of all, looking at it is a lot of them, if you're not on it at this point in time, there's been a conscious decision internally to not be there. And I'm in the same boat as you, which is in most cases, there's no reason not to be on the platform at this point in time. The level of brands, Amazon's push into obviously luxury beauty that's out there, but other, they're going upstream. They actually started at the Target shopper, right? And they're actually going upstream. There's no real reason not to be there. The biggest thing is just the misconceptions people have about Amazon. As soon as I put my product there, Amazon's going to drop the price. Okay, so don't go first party. As soon as I go up there, everybody can sell my product. Okay, well, put the authorized reseller agreements in place. All of the things that are keeping them off from Amazon have now been addressed, almost all of it. The only thing that isn't addressed, if you're super high luxury, high price point item, is you just don't want your brand on Amazon because you're a high touch, high interaction brand, and they just don't.
Yeah,
they don't want to be there, and I can totally get it. This happens with some, really high end, women's clothing brands, right? They're like, hey, we just don't want to be. I'll say this on the caveat is, but what I've seen is that they've started to actually put a limited selection on Amazon for everything that you talked about, brand awareness, right? And you don't have to put the whole collection up there, right? But putting a
correct.
subset of the always on, which a lot of these high end fashion, they don't want to have an always on chino or something like that, right? A pant. But if you can do that, you can really start to see who's shopping, what they're shopping for. And you can actually take and see what they then find is when they take their direct consumer shopper, they find out there's, millions of people in that category that are shopping on Amazon. But then you flip it to other side. Usually the one misconception that people have is if you're not a well-known brand, like you're not skyrocketing to the top. If you're starting off on Amazon, and so some people are like, oh, see, I told you so. There's, we don't have any sales for the first like 9 or 10 months. Well, number one, you opened up a third-party storefront that never had any sales. Number two, you uploaded a product that's never been on the platform before. So you're on page 5 trillion of search now. And number three, you were tying advertising to total sales, which means you never advertised. And Amazon is pay to play. Everybody knows it.
Yeah.
And so they end up shooting themselves in the foot. And so there's two sides. Hey, you should be there, but these are the things you're going to have to do once you're there. And if you're not going to do them, that's fine, but then it's probably not worth your time. Right? It isn't, because you're not going to move enough product. So that's, obviously though, the worst answer of all time. It depends. But that's kind of just, I advise your hands on it. Yeah.
But one thing that I'm very interested in, and I have one other question for you, is a lot of these brands, we have this conversation, Amazon is not often looked at like this, but it can be a introduction to your brand. Right? It can be a form of verification. It can lend you credibility, right? There is something to be said for the Amazon stamp of approval in a way where customers look at Amazon to understand, is this brand on there? Is it real? There is some component of that. And the other side is for brands that are premium, right? Where they want people in their ecosystem and they want lifetime value and they want you to buy a broader assortment of what they may be offering. Why not then put the product that drives the majority of your new customers to your brand on Amazon? You don't have to offer everything. They're then forced to come to your website if they enjoy your product and your brand. You'll then get their first party data down the road, and Amazon will ideally allow you to acquire customers more profitably than what you are on other channels. Your AOV will be lower, of course, but it's a channel that can continue to drive your business. And I think that is overlooked by brands as like it has to work for everything or it has to work for nothing. I think there is a middle ground that is very applicable.
Yeah. And I think another advice while you're talking, it made me think of this is imagine you're going to hire somebody this is where I'm walking them through because they want to know total investment. And I would say, how much would you pay for somebody to come unlock one of the largest retailers in the US? Amazon, right? But pretend it's not Amazon. You want them to unlock a Walmart, right? Or Kroger or whatever. How much would you be willing to pay a salesperson to do that? And usually it's like, hey, actually, based on the size of the company, it might be $80,000-$90,000, right? Plus a commission, right? If they can do it. I want you to come in and do all this stuff. And then I just kind of advise them like, so don't go hire somebody. You find a partner in the space. Right. That's really what I encourage them to do, because they can go to an agency, they can go to a third party wholesale resale partner. They're out there that can really help you. They have all the expertise, because Amazon's unique is you're not just going to need one person. You're going to need a team of people to go do it. But if you take that mindset of, hey, you know what? I'd spend up to $90,000 and every business is going to have a different number, and then go find a partner and use that money in two ways. One, to pay, there's probably going to be a monthly, fee for working with them. And the other leftover money, spend on advertising. And what you'll have after a year, we'll say it costs you $5,000 a month. So you're paying 60 grand to an agency to help you get, or a partner to help you get this running. You've got 30 grand left over, dump it into Amazon. And it's literally no different than you taking a gamble on a salesperson to break you into Kroger for $90,000, or you trying to break into Amazon, but you have that paid media piece. And you have to do that. And once you set that aside, you're going to get a really good feel at the end of 12 months. And if it doesn't work, the cool thing is you don't fire anybody. You haven't brought anybody internal. You just turn that agency off, or you turn that third party, wholesale resale partner off, and you just go back to how it was. For me, I have to know the answer to that question. If I'm a brand, I would keep me up at night. Should I be on Amazon or not? Am I missing out on something or not? And for me, that would be something worth finding out. And that's kind of how I walk in. And if it's not to you, then fine, then don't go on the platform. But if you're going to go in, this is how I like to, I put everything into dollar and cents. Like, this is how I would look at it. And then I could look at my ROI at the end of the year. That's kind of what goes through my mind when I'm advising the brands, big and small. Like, this is how I would look at it. Because a lot of times you're like, oh, I don't want to spend $5,000 or $6,000 or $3,000 a month on an agency. Okay, how much would you spend on hiring somebody new? I don't know, 50, 60,000. Like, it's the same price.
Yeah.
But you get a fleet of people who really know what they're doing. Too funny. I don't know if you had other questions or anything like that, but
No, I completely agree. I think that the reality is, if you're a scaling brand and you're investing off platform, you want to be on Amazon and capture those sales. So getting set up inherently over 12 or 24 months as you're growing your brand will return value. There's almost no doubt in that. I think when you talk to big brands, the other question I have for you is, and something I've been thinking a lot about, what is the future of Vendor Central? Right? Is there a future for brands there? Costs are going up every year. It's not as efficient. You lose substantially more control over your brand presence, your pricing. That's something that I am trying to understand the dynamic of whether Amazon even wants it around anymore or not. I'm curious your thoughts there.
It's interesting because AVNs are going on right now. And just having been through AVNs when I was on the brand side multiple times, have a good feeling of how they're approaching it. And then just talking to enough Amazon people. It's funny that you say that. If you remember, I think this was 5 years ago, Amazon sent out this random email. And the random email told all these vendors they were no longer on Vendor Central. They're going to Seller Central. And everybody freaked out. I think it was actually during Shop Talk, right, that this email went out. So you have all these industry people together at a giant trade show. And this email hits and like my phone blows up. We end up like having to throw a quick webinar because everybody's asking questions. We had like 300 people dial in on a last minute webinar that had gotten this letter, and everybody's trying to figure out what's going on. And Amazon then came out and said, oh, sorry, that was a mistake. Like, nobody mistakenly types out paragraphs, right? Like,
yes,
what was it? It was crafted email. Now, whether or not they were actually supposed to hit send or not, I also don't know how you go into the to line and you craft out, because not all vendors get it, specific subsets of people. Anyways, hey, just kidding. Everybody back to the platform.
Yeah.
That had everybody thinking, is there Vendor Central around? And then everything, the pandemic hits the next year. Amazon wants to hoard inventory. So then they have to buy it to make sure they're the ones that have it. So they're holding on to 18 weeks of inventory. But now we're getting back to a point where I have a lot of people where Amazon is just putting out more ridiculous than ever co-ops. Like,
yes,
they want 49, 50%.
Yeah.
It doesn't even make sense. And in my mind, that's a, hey, go forget yourself number, right? Like, we're going to make it so big that you're going to want to go do something else. You're going to want to go to the third party side. I put that over top of, I've had a lot of brands have been told in the past, you can't go third party, and now finally are being allowed to go. So I don't know this. If I had to sit back, I would say there's going to be key partnerships that Amazon with super large companies or unique brands or specific relationships they want that will remain on Vendor Central because of that wholesale model that a lot of brands
Yes.
don't want to go to Seller Central and have to set up the individual relieving of inventory. But it'll be a different Vendor Central, right? We've seen everything keep getting consolidated. It'll be a different Vendor Central. It might be the Vendor Central that's all AI driven, and you don't even have a vendor manager anymore. That's
that. I was going to say a lot of brands we talk to that are on vendor but are sub 10 million of revenue do not have vendor managers anymore. Right? They get no service. They get POs appear when they appear.
They will give you an SVS for $300,000 a year.
Of course.
Yeah.
And they don't really have full transparency into what's going on. My belief here is, to your point, there are brands that will always be on vendor. A Clorox, right? A Kleenex, like a Charmin, potentially. These brands that are going to work with Amazon as a vendor relationship. The brands that have not hit, in my opinion, 20, 30, 40 million in vendor of revenue, where it's a big enough piece of the pie for Amazon, I think over time, they're just going to be deprioritized, and you are either going to be proactive or reactive in that situation. Are you going to wait for it to happen to you and then be scrambling to get it live? Or are you going to consciously make the decision to rebuild and make sure that you don't lose time within the marketplace and take advantage of kind of the volume you've been able to create? And the wrench that's thrown in all of this are these like 2P sellers, right? That have these vendor relationships where they aggregate brands together and they sell on behalf of them on vendor distributors, et cetera. That I think is going to be a huge shift in their ability to actually profitably, to any means, have those relationships with vendors.
Oh, 100%. And I also think they'll become a brand launch platform in and of themselves, right? Because like we talked about, like if you're jumping on Amazon for the first time, your third party, your Seller Central account has no traffic, has no integrity whatsoever. There's no ratings on it. Like, nobody knows anything. So the algorithm's obviously going to push it to the bottom. But if you go with one of these big sellers that's out there, the team over at Pattern, they've been great friends to the network since we kicked this off. I think Dave Wright over there he's just an awesome guy. Poured into this network just when we're trying to kick it off. So like really grateful to the team over there. Like they already have so much storefront traffic. They have so much integrity in the back end. You're launching a new product. It conquers that whole piece that's so hard to conquer, is getting anybody to buy from you in the first place. And they deal with larger brands. There's smaller ones like a Reach Brands or somebody like that are doing some really cool, but they buy wholesale and they're a resale partner and they can accelerate you. And then the thing is, on the third party side, at any point in time, if you want to take it, you can. Which has kind of been a thing with the Vendor Central side, is your Vendor Central, they don't want you to be third party. It's going to be a fun ride. We're getting close to time here. Like like last thoughts, like love this conversation. Appreciate you and the team over.
Likewise.
Everything you guys do for the network. But what keeps you up at night, I guess, is a great question to end on.
I've been sleeping well, to be honest. Good. I will say the things that keep me up at night are really what are we doing to drive traffic to Amazon? That's the forefront of what I'm looking at right now. So where are the most efficient channels for us to drive to Amazon? How are we tracking them? Is the tracking accurate? And how can we put proposals in front of the brands we work with that we can stand behind for large sums of money, $20,000, $30,000, $50,000 commitments here, and be able to give them the data they need to feel confident that it drove a return? That is a large area we are investing in and trying to understand. And I think that's going to be a very hot area for the next 12 to 24 months.
Oh, 100%. I think that's a great spot to spend your time, because profitability is huge, and understanding a good part of that is understanding where are you getting a return and where are the places to put your money, and is it working or not?
Yeah.
And we have now executive teams getting really, really smart at what they're doing. And they're asking really, really good questions. And that's exciting because you don't have to spend as much time teaching upwards. It also means you better have it all in order.
Exactly right.
Awesome. Well, this has been a fantastic conversation. Thanks so much for your time today.
Thank you.
I really appreciate you and all you guys do for the network. And with that, we're going to wrap up this episode of the Digital Deep Dive. Thanks so much, Matt. We'll see you.
Thank you.